Reborn as my killer's daughter, the ultimate revenge they never saw coming. After being murdered by my husband and best friend, I found myself queuing at the registry of the afterlife, awaiting rebirth and reincarnation. Which family shall it be? The spectral clerk asked me, looking over his spectacles. I pointed at the despicable couple visible in the great looking-glass of fate. A sinister smile played on my lips. Their family. I wish to be the fruit of their love. The spectral messenger paused, adjusting his collar, then advised me, such strong resentment, madam. Do take care it doesn't affect your fortunes in the next life. It's quite all right. I waved my hand dismissively. In this life, I intend to be a dutiful daughter who returns to repay their kindness. The next second, I was enveloped by warm amniotic fluid followed by a dizzying squeezing sensation, accompanied by a lusty cry, and was born under the identity of Charlotte, the daughter of an enemy. Congratulations, Mr. Harrington. It's a baby girl. And what a healthy set of lungs. The midwife wiped me clean and carefully carried me to the woman, Victoria, my former best friend. At this moment, her face was pale, yet it radiated a Madonna-like glow as she reached out her hand to me. Darling, let Mummy hold you. Her voice was so gentle it could melt butter. Mummy, you think you're worthy. The instant her fingertips grazed my skin, without any warning, I burst into the most agonizing, frantic wails I had ever uttered in my life. Wah! My cries were so piercing they cut through the warmth of the delivery suite. The nurses and consultant obstetricians were startled. Victoria, even more terrified, gave a jolt, almost dropping me. What's wrong? She was fine just a moment ago. The nurse quickly took me back, and as soon as I left Victoria's arms, my crying instantly subsided. It's likely just newborn insecurity, the doctor explained casually, adjusting his cuffs, not giving it much thought, but Victoria's expression had already subtly changed. Returning to Harrington Manor, as soon as she came within 3 paces of me, my internal alarm automatically sounded. As soon as she reached out to hug me, I instantly transformed from a perfectly sculpted cherub into a desperately struggling hedgehog. My limbs flailed wildly, and my sharp little nails mercilessly clawed at all the exposed skin on her face, neck, and arms. Ouch! Victoria bellowed in pain, looking down to see 3 distinct bloody scratches already marring her smooth arm. And I, seizing the opportunity, cried even more pitifully, as if I had suffered a great injustice. What's going on, Arthur? Arthur arrived at the sound, witnessing exactly this scene. Victoria had blood on her arm, and her daughter was crying her heart out in her embrace as if enduring some kind of torture. I don't know. She suddenly just. Victoria's face was ashen. Arthur impatiently took me from her. The moment I was in his arms, my crying stopped immediately. I even sniffled twice in distress, burying my flushed little face in his warm, tailored waistcoat. I found a comfortable position and fell into a deep sleep. That well-behaved and quiet demeanor was a complete contrast to just moments before. Arthur looked at his angelic daughter in his arms, then at the scratches on his wife's arm, his brows furrowing into a deep frown. From that day on, this became the daily routine of the Harrington family. If Victoria held me, I scratched her and cried as if the sky were falling. Whether it was Arthur, grandfather, grandmother, or even Nanny Higgins holding me, I was as obedient as a porcelain doll. In less than a month, new injuries covered old ones on Victoria's body. She had to use heavy stage makeup to cover the bloodstains on her face. Meanwhile, the rumor that the Harrington family's little princess was naturally incompatible with her mother quietly began to spread through high society. That evening, Victoria's lip was scratched open by me once again. She finally broke down. What exactly do you want? She closed the nursery door, lowered her voice, and hissed at me in the cot, her face contorted. Are you a devil? Why are you only targeting me? I watched her quietly, my innocent, clear eyes wide open. Yes, I am the devil who has come to claim your life. Seeing that I wasn't crying or making a fuss, Victoria's rationality returned slightly. She took a deep breath, as if reassuring herself. You're just a baby who doesn't understand anything. You don't understand. Her hand trembled as she reached for me again, seemingly wanting to prove something. Just then, the door was pushed open. Arthur walked in holding a glass of warm milk. What he saw was his wife's ferocious expression and her threatening hand reaching toward their daughter. "Victoria, what are you doing?" He lunged forward, holding me tightly in his arms. His gaze aimed at her filled with disappointment and coldness. "I didn't. I just wanted to hug her," Victoria argued desperately. Arthur held me and whispered comforting words, then spoke to Victoria without looking up. "If you don't like her, stay away from her. From now on, let Nanny Higgins take care of her." Ever since her maternal rights were effectively revoked, Victoria's status in the family plummeted. She transformed from the mistress of the house into a mere symbolic mother, a dispensable lodger. Arthur grew increasingly distant from her, and the grandparents simply ignored her outright. Only at formal family gatherings, where appearances mattered, was she allowed to hold me and play the part of a loving mother and beautiful daughter, and I, showered with everyone's affection, grew to be 2 years old. I started to speak a few simple, indistinct words, every word meticulously calculated by me. On the day of grandfather's birthday banquet, Harrington Manor was filled with distinguished guests, bustling with excitement. Dressed in a little ruby red velvet dress, like a lucky mascot, I was held in grandfather's arms, receiving everyone's praise. Victoria, in an expensive gown and exquisite jewelry, stood to the side, forcing a smile. I knew she was waiting for an opportunity, a chance to publicly display motherly love and salvage some dignity. Sure enough, who carry a face dar, it was time to cut the cake. Carrying a small slice of Victoria's sponge, she walked towards me with elegant steps, her voice so soft it could drip with sweetness. "Charlotte, my darling, come here. Let Mummy feed you some cake." She had calculated that in such a situation I wouldn't let her lose face. Unfortunately, she miscalculated. I had waited for this day for far too long. I immediately struggled out of grandfather's arms, sliding down and backing away repeatedly as if I had seen something filthy. My small face was filled with fear and resistance. "No, don't," I stammered. Victoria's smile froze. The relatives around us all cast glances, eager to see what would happen. "Charlotte, be sensible. Mummy means no harm." She grew anxious and took another step forward, trying to grab my hand. Now was the time. I abruptly raised my small hand, pointing with all my might at her face, which was slightly contorted by guilt. Then I summoned all the resentment and murderous intent from my past life, condensing them into the most venomous curse through the mouth of a 2-year-old child. I shrieked word by word, "Wicked man! Kill! Kill someone!" Everyone stared at me, stunned to silence, then looked at Victoria, whose face had instantly turned as pale as a ghost. "Kill someone? What did she say? Did I hear that right? Good heavens, this child. Is she possessed?" A tide of whispers surged. Grandfather and grandmother were the first to react, pulling me into their embrace, tenderly patting my back. "Charlotte, don't be afraid. Did you have a nightmare yesterday?" "Nonsense." Arthur's face instantly lost all color. Victoria completely broke down. "It wasn't me. I didn't do it," she screamed. Uncontrollably, pointing at me, her voice shrill and frantic. "It's her. This little beast is lying. She's not a normal child. She's a devil." A mother publicly cursed her own daughter, calling her a beast and a devil. "Shut up." Arthur rushed forward and slapped her hard across the face in front of everyone. "Are you mad? Saying such things to a 2-year-old child?" I lay in grandfather's arms, watching that despicable couple turn on each other, a thrill of satisfaction surging through me. The farce at the birthday banquet became the last straw that broke Victoria's back. Mad woman, bitter wife, mother cursed by her own daughter. These labels stuck to her like stubborn plasters in high society, making it impossible for her to hold her head high. Throughout the Harrington family, Arthur avoided her like the plague. He seemed to truly believe my claim of being a vengeful ghost incarnation. As soon as he got home, he locked himself in his study, preferring to face ghosts rather than his true love. Completely isolated, Victoria's mental state visibly deteriorated. She no longer dared to approach me. But every time she looked at me, her eyes were filled with resentment. She started giving me the silent treatment. She'd deliberately knock over my milk and make jarring noises while I was sleeping. She even pinched my arm hard when no one was around. I silently endured it all because I knew she was venting her anger, and I was waiting for an opportunity to cast her into hell. That opportunity was the crystal music box she kept hidden in the deepest part of her jewelry casket. That was a token of love Arthur gave her after she became pregnant with me. I quietly slipped into her room. I brought over a stool, climbed onto the dressing table, and found that crystal-clear music box without a moment's hesitation. I lifted it and with all my might smashed it against the marble floor. Smash! With a sharp crack, the music box shattered into a pile of glass shards. This is not enough. I closed my eyes, and the image of my tragic death in my previous life flashed through my mind. Then I picked up the sharpest shard and without hesitation forcefully drew it across my fair, tender arm. Ouch! A sharp sting shot through me, and blood immediately welled up. The intense pain made it almost impossible for me to stand. I smeared a few drops of blood on the dress of my most beloved doll. Then, clutching it and covered in evidence, I stumbled out of the room. Grandfather, grandmother. My fearful, tearful screams made everyone look at me in horror. I was disheveled, trembling all over, holding a blood-stained doll in my hands. On my other arm, a deep, bone-visible wound was gushing blood. Good heavens, Charlotte! Grandmother let out a piercing scream and rushed over first. I buried my head in my grandmother's arms, crying so hard I could barely catch my breath. Using the broken phrases I had practiced so hard, I pieced together the most perfect lie. Mummy wicked. Mummy doesn't like Charlotte. I lifted the blood-stained doll. Crying so hard I nearly fainted. Broken the doll. The doll is broken. Finally, I stretched up my bleeding arm and whimpered softly. Hand hurts. Bleeding. Every word I spoke landed heavily on everyone's hearts. Victoria was completely stunned. She looked at the wound on my arm, then at her own empty hands, her mind a blank. No, it wasn't me. I didn't. Her defense in the face of all this blood seemed so pale and powerless. You venomous woman. Grandfather trembled with rage, pointing at her nose, his eyes wide with fury. How dare you do such a vicious thing to Charlotte? Our Harrington family cannot tolerate a woman as deranged as you. Arthur was completely terrified by the bloody scene before him. He looked at me, then at the frenzied Victoria, and the last trace of marital affection in his eyes was replaced by fear and disgust. Just as they were about to send me to the hospital, I leaned on grandfather's shoulder, looking past everyone's panic, and coldly stared at Victoria, whose face was ashen. I silently mouthed a phrase at her. Go to hell. She understood. She looked at me, finally letting out a scream of extreme terror, a sound not human. The wound on my arm required 5 stitches. I became the most precious porcelain doll in Harrington Manor. Carefully cradled wherever I went. Grandfather specially hired 2 close protection officers for me, working in shifts around the clock. Their only task is to ensure Victoria cannot come within 3 meters of me. Victoria, on the other hand, has been completely confined to her bedroom quarters. I heard she was smashing things like a madwoman, crying, and screaming that I was a devil and that I had hurt myself. Unfortunately, no one believed her. Who would believe the words of a mad woman who only harms children? But I knew this wasn't enough. House arrest isn't the end. What I want is for her to completely and cleanly disappear from this house, from my life. That day, I sent the protection officers away, saying I wanted to play hide and seek by myself for a while. Then I quietly walked to the door of her bedroom. The door was unlocked. She was sitting on the carpet. In front of her, the crystal music box I had smashed. She was muttering to herself like a madwoman. I pushed the door open and walked in. When she saw me, She shrank back to the corner like a frightened rabbit, her eyes filled with fear. "You. What are you doing here?" I walked up to her, crouched down, and said to her in a tone completely unlike my age, word by word, "I'm here to take back what's mine." Victoria's pupils suddenly constricted. I looked at her and slowly revealed a smile that belonged to Eleanor, one she was most familiar with. "You stole my husband. You killed me. Now, I'm going to take everything back, piece by piece." Victoria's sanity at this moment completely snapped. She finally realized that I was no ordinary child. I was Eleanor's vengeful spirit, returned to claim her life. "Devil! I'll kill you! You devil!" she screamed, lunging at me like a madwoman, her bloodshot eyes blazing with the most primal murderous intent. She grabbed my arm and dragged me out, pulling me toward the long marble staircase on the first-floor landing. I did not resist. I was even cooperating with her. I was precisely calculating the time. I knew that in another 10 seconds, Grandfather would come out of his study to go downstairs for his unshakable daily afternoon tea. "Go to hell, you little beast." Victoria had completely lost her mind. She dragged me to the stairwell head and raised her hand high. And now was the time. I heard the faint sound of the study door handle being turned just as Victoria's slap was about to land. I used all my strength to let out the most heart-wrenching, most terrified scream. "Mummy, don't push me." Then, I actively broke free from her hand. Without hesitation, I tumbled down those dozens of cold, hard steps. The world spun. The searing pain of my bones hitting the steps almost made me pass out on the spot. Bang! My body, like a broken rag doll, crashed heavily onto the ground floor landing. My left arm was twisted at an unnatural, grotesque angle. The excruciating pain engulfed me like a tsunami, but I still mustered every last ounce of strength to lift my head. I saw Grandfather standing at the top of the stairs on the first floor, his face ashen, trembling as he witnessed the hellish scene before him. He saw Victoria's hand raised high, not yet lowered. He heard my desperate cry of "Don't push me." He also witnessed the horrible scene of me falling down the stairs. I met his eyes filled with shock, anger, and endless sorrow. I extended my uninjured right hand, trembling, and pointed at the woman upstairs who had completely frozen in place. My tears and cold sweat mingled, my voice faint. "Grandfather, save me. Mummy. She's going to kill me." The moment I finished speaking, my head lolled to the side, and I fainted. Before I lost consciousness, I heard Grandfather's voice, a roar distorted by extreme anger and heartache. I was unconscious in the private hospital wing for a full day and night. By the time I woke up, my left arm was already in a thick cast, suspended high in front of my chest. The diagnosis read, fractured ulna in the left arm accompanied by severe multiple soft tissue contusions. My Charlotte, my darling, grandmother held me, crying her heart out. She stroked my face over and over again. Grandfather stood by the window, his figure desolate. Yet an aura of an impending storm emanated from him. From grandmother's intermittent sobs, I pieced together everything that happened after my coma. The ambulance and grandfather's personal solicitor arrived at the Harrington family villa almost simultaneously. Victoria was immediately restrained by security bodyguards and locked in the attic quarters on the 3rd floor. There is someone guarding the door 24 hours a day. She was screaming and cursing inside like a madwoman, calling me a devil and saying everything was my design. Unfortunately, my broken bones and my speechlessness from shock symptoms are the ironclad evidence of all her crimes. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Grandfather personally wheeled me into the great hall of Harrington Manor in a wheelchair. In the hall, all the relatives of the Harrington family, as well as the family's legal advisors, were sitting solemnly. Victoria, who had been escorted down from the attic by security, was thrown into the center of the hall like a discarded rag. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes vacant, and she had long lost any trace of her former radiance. Arthur, grandfather's voice was cold granite, devoid of any warmth. Arthur trembled slightly, lowered his head, and stepped forward. The solicitor placed a document and a fountain pen in front of him. This is the separation agreement leading to divorce. Sign it. Let her leave with nothing. Otherwise, you and she can both get out of this house. There was no room for negotiation. This was forcing Arthur to make a choice, to choose the true love he had once been willing to kill his wife for, or to choose the wealth and glory of the Harrington family. Arthur's face turned pale, then flushed with anger. He glanced at Victoria, who lay withered on the ground, then at me, pale and pitiful in my wheelchair, his only and future sole support. He made the choice in just half a second. He picked up the pen and without even looking at the content of the agreement, quickly signed his name at the end. Father, I'm sorry. He turned to grandfather, bowed deeply, his voice filled with remorse. It was my blindness that brought a wolf into our home, nearly harming Charlotte and endangering our Harrington family. He completely absolved himself of all responsibility. Arthur, you. Victoria, on the ground, looked up in disbelief. She looked at the man she had given everything to love, at his cold and resolute face at this moment, and finally understood something. She didn't cry or make a scene anymore. Instead, she laughed. Ha 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 ha. Her laughter was bitter and hysterical. Retribution. It's all retribution, Arthur. You will face retribution. And that little beast, she's not human. She will devour you. All of you will die. Amidst her curses, the security team stepped forward, their faces expressionless. They dragged her out of the opulent home she had once dreamed of. After Victoria was dragged away, grandfather turned to the solicitor and said something that shattered Arthur's heart. Draft another document. Transfer 20% of the shares of the Harrington Group under my name to Charlotte immediately. Grandfather walked over to me, gently touched my arm in a cast, his eyes filled with deep pity and guilt. In front of everyone, he announced, from today onward, Charlotte is the sole heir of the Harrington family. Arthur's body suddenly swayed. He looked at me, his 3-year-old daughter, sitting in a wheelchair for the first time. All the fatherly love and pity vanished from his eyes. Daddy, now it's your turn. After Victoria was kicked out, my left arm recovered for a whole year. Even though it had long healed, I would still hold my arm and cry pain on every rainy day, to remind everyone in the Harrington family, especially Arthur, of what they owed me. Nourished by this guilt, I grew to 7 years old. I became the little queen of the Harrington family, whose word was law. My grandparents followed my every command. While my father, Arthur, was completely reduced to my senior servant, his authority in the city company was stripped away, and his daily routine consisted of being my chauffeur on the school run and playing games with me. His only purpose in life was to play the role of a perfectly devoted father to make up for the mistakes he had made in the past. A man in his prime, full of ambition, trapped in such a life, naturally sought solace elsewhere. Soon, I began to smell unfamiliar perfume on him. I hacked into his phone with the latest tablet grandfather got me. It was child's play. That woman was named Sophie, a young and beautiful recent university graduate. Arthur rented her a high-end apartment in Knightsbridge, gave her designer bags, and gifted her jewelry, all with a lavish hand. He was clearly deeply in love. The chat logs were filled with cheesy terms like baby and my newborn. I looked at those chat logs and smiled. Arthur, your rebirth will be your death day. I didn't go to grandparents to complain. That would have been too easy for him. I chose a night when he had just returned home in the best of moods, holding my teddy bear. I walked into his study. Daddy, I called out timidly. Charlotte, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Arthur immediately put down his phone and opened his arms to me. I didn't go over, just stood where I was, lowered my head, and asked quietly, Daddy, do you not want Charlotte anymore? Don't talk rot. Arthur's expression changed instantly. How could Daddy ever not want you? I looked up, my eyes already brimming with tears. But I saw you buying a pretty dress for another lady. Are you going to find me a new mummy? Is Charlotte not good enough? As I spoke, tears streamed down my face, and I cried with a mix of sorrow and British restraint. Arthur was completely flustered. He rushed over and pulled me into his arms, stammering as he tried to explain. No, Daddy just made a new friend. Daddy would never abandon Charlotte. Really? I asked, looking up with tear-filled eyes. Really, he swore, pointing to the sky. I watched his panicked expression and knew the time was right. I stopped crying and instead, with a maturity beyond my years, began to think for him. Daddy, don't be scared. I used my small hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Daddy must be lonely all by himself. Charlotte knows. As long as Daddy is happy, that's all that matters. Arthur froze. He probably expected me to throw a tantrum, but instead, he was met with this kind of consideration. I sniffled, and with all the acting skills I possessed, I delivered the most devastating blow. Daddy, you absolutely must not let grandfather and grandmother know. I clutched his waistcoat, lowering my voice as if sharing a huge secret. They'll be angry with you. Charlotte will keep your secret. Let's pinky promise. I extended my pinky finger. Arthur looked at me, his eyes slowly reddening. Emotion, guilt, and a sense of relief at having survived a disaster filled his eyes. He thought I was genuinely looking out for him. He thought I, the daughter he had wronged so much, was his only ally. He trembled and hooked pinkies with me. Charlotte, you really are Daddy's little angel. He choked up, holding me tightly in his arms. I took the opportunity to pull a black Centurion bank card out of my pocket. It was a supplementary card grandfather gave me with no spending limit. Daddy, this is for you. I pressed it into his hand. Please help me buy a necklace for that beautiful lady. If she's happy, Daddy will smile more. At that moment, Arthur's emotional defenses were completely shattered by me. He held me, a man almost 40 years old, crying like a child. He kept saying I was his salvation in this lifetime. I let him hold me, wearing the most innocent and pure smile on my face, but inside I was sneering. Don't cry when I personally send you to hell. You'll have plenty of time to thank me, your good daughter. With my encouragement and cover, Arthur and the woman named Sophie fell even more deeply in love. Arthur naively believed that I, his daughter, was his only ally. And he even began to openly fantasize about his brand new future in front of me. When grandfather gets old and I grow up, he can openly be with Sophie and have another sensible son. I listened to his drunken ramblings, a naive smile on my face. But my heart was filled with icy killing intent. Arthur, you really deserve to die. All the while, I was funding their love with the money grandfather gave me. On the other hand, he secretly contacted Sophie using another phone. I knew she was pregnant. I knew she longed for status. I also knew that deep down she was a greedy and foolish woman. On grandmother's 65th birthday, I timed it perfectly and anonymously sent her one last message. Arthur announces engagement to the daughter of the Sterling Group tonight. You and your child will end up with nothing. This is your last chance. The Harrington family's birthday banquet. I wore a white princess dress nestled beside grandmother, receiving everyone's blessings. Arthur stood not far away holding a glass of champagne, beaming with joy. He probably thought that as long as he appeased me and appeased grandfather and grandmother, he could continue to live so peacefully forever. Just as grandmother was about to cut the cake and the party atmosphere reached its peak. Arthur, get out here. A young woman, heavily pregnant and in tears, burst through security like a madwoman and stormed in Sophie. All eyes in the room instantly focused on her and Arthur, whose face turned deathly pale in an instant. You liar. Sophie pointed at Arthur, crying her heart out. You said you would marry me. You said you would give our child a home. And now you're going to get engaged to another woman, aren't you? What nonsense are you talking? Get out of here. Arthur was scared out of his wits and rushed forward, trying to cover her mouth and drag her away. The scene instantly descended into chaos. Grandfather was trembling with anger, and grandmother's face turned pale. I looked at the grand drama unfolding before me, a drama I had personally directed, and knew it was time for me, the best actress, to make my entrance. I ran up from beside grandmother, crying and shouting in a panic as I ran. "Daddy, Daddy, what's wrong with you? Who is this lady? Make her leave." I dashed between the two struggling figures, stretched out my frail little hands, and pushed Sophie with all my might. "You wicked woman. Don't you dare bully my daddy." Of course, I knew that an 8-year-old child's strength couldn't possibly push down an adult. But I didn't need to actually push her down. All I needed was to find the right angle amidst the chaotic struggle and use my body to violently ram into her heavily pregnant belly. "Ah!" Sophie let out a piercing scream, her entire body collapsing backward like a kite with its string cut. A dull thud sounded. She collapsed onto the ground, and bright red blood quickly spread up from beneath her dress. Everyone was stunned by the bloody scene. Arthur stared blankly at the blood on the ground, then looked at me, his lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. I, on the other hand, was immediately scared out of my wits, plopping down on the ground and bursting into earth-shattering sobs. I didn't look at the woman on the ground, but instead stumbled and crawled toward my grandmother, who had already rushed over, clinging tightly to her leg. "Grandmother, I'm sorry." I cried so hard I could barely catch my breath, almost fainting. I didn't mean to. I just wanted Daddy to come home. That lady, she was holding on to Daddy and wouldn't let go. That's why I pushed her. "Grandmother, did I cause a lot of trouble?" Boo-hoo. My crying was filled with the innocence, fear, and self-reproach of a child who had caused trouble. Everyone present looked at the woman who had miscarried on the ground, then at the distraught Arthur, and finally at me, the victim who was crying so hard I could barely breathe, all in my desperate attempt to protect my father. Their gazes slowly shifted from shock to sympathy and pity. Yes, I'm just an 8-year-old child. I just wanted to protect my dad. What did I do wrong? Grandmother's birthday banquet ended in a bloody farce. Sophie was rushed to the hospital, but the baby could not be saved. She cried her heart out in the hospital, placing all the blame on Arthur, who had deceived her feelings. As for me, due to extreme shock and deep self-blame, I developed a high fever and fell unconscious. My illness became the final straw that broke Arthur. Grandfather looked at me, lying in the hospital bed, my face flushed with fever and still delirious, and delivered his final judgment to Arthur. "From today onwards, I no longer have a son in you. All the assets of the Harrington family have nothing to do with you. The cards under your name have all been frozen. Get out." "No, Father." Arthur widened his eyes in disbelief, knelt down, and desperately begged while clinging to grandfather's leg, but grandfather just coldly kicked him away. And so, Arthur was stripped of everything, driven out of the Harrington family like a stray dog. I was sick for a fortnight. Over the past 2 weeks, I have been fully aware of Arthur's situation. He was penniless, and his reputation was ruined. Sophie's family harbored an even deeper hatred for him, hiring someone to break one of his legs. Like a rat scurrying across the street, he hid in the cheapest, filthiest bedsit. He survived by selling the last of his luxury watches and belts. I know that a cornered gambler will do the most insane things, and I was his last, his only bet. I deliberately let the protection officers lower their guard, and every day after school, I insisted on staying an extra 10 minutes at the patisserie by the school gates. On the 3rd day, that familiar yet unfamiliar figure appeared. Arthur limped toward me. He had lost a lot of weight, and his eyes were bloodshot with madness. "Charlotte." His voice was hoarse. The surrounding officers immediately became alert. But I shook my head at them and then, like a happy little bird, dashed toward Arthur. "Daddy, I missed you so much." I threw myself into his arms, using a coquettish tone to say the most heart-wrenching words. "Grandfather won't let me see you. Daddy, have you abandoned Charlotte?" My innocence and dependence made the madness in his eyes recede a little. It was replaced by a twisted kind of fatherly love and hope. How could Daddy not want you? He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear in a voice only we two could hear. Charlotte, can you do Daddy a favor? If you come with me, we can be together forever from now on. Okay. I nodded without hesitation. I took his hand and, under the astonished gaze of the officers, got into his dilapidated minivan. The car drove all the way to a derelict, unfinished warehouse in the industrial lands. He used an old-fashioned mobile phone to call grandfather, his voice trembling with excitement. Father, I've got Charlotte. Get me £1 billion. Otherwise, I'll take her down with me. Hanging up the phone, he looked at me with a complex gaze. There was greed, guilt, but more than anything, a desperate madness. I sat in the corner, hugging my school bag, tilting my head, and asked with a naive expression, Daddy, are we playing a game? Like you and Victoria dealing with that Auntie Eleanor in the picture? Arthur's body suddenly stiffened. You, how do you know? He looked at me in horror, as if looking at a monster. Because I saw it, I giggled, pointing to my eyes. I've always been watching you. He broke down. He clutched his head and began to shriek incoherently. It's not my fault. It's all that Victoria. It was her idea. She said as long as Eleanor died, we could be together forever. She was the one who contacted the people for the car accident. I just drove to lead her onto that road. I didn't want her to die. I really didn't want her to die. He shouted out all his crimes right in front of me, and I quietly pressed the switch on the miniature recorder attached to my school bag's pendant. Thank you for your confession. Now you can die in peace. As I pressed the switch on the voice recorder, I also activated the emergency locator system hidden in the pendant. Everything grandfather gave me was top-tier military grade. Within 10 minutes, the sound of sirens grew closer and closer. Armed response units descended from the sky, pinning the completely mentally broken Arthur firmly to the ground. As for me, I was held in the arms of a tall police officer. He covered my eyes with his warm, large hand and gently said to me, "Don't be afraid, little one. It's all over now." I buried my face in his arms, trembling all over. At the police station, I met my anxious grandparents. I threw myself into their arms and burst into tears. Only then, belatedly, pulling the little bear pendant from my pocket. "Grandfather, Daddy." He said so many terrible things. I sobbed, handing over the voice recorder. I was scared, so I pressed here. The evidence is irrefutable. Kidnapping, conspiracy to murder, multiple offenses carrying mandatory sentences. Both of them were sentenced to life imprisonment. Years later, at my coming-of-age ceremony, grandfather officially handed over the position of chairman of the Harrington Group to me. With my assistance, the Harrington Group's market value has tripled, shining brighter than ever before in the city. And I, Charlotte Harrington, have become the youngest and most legendary queen in the entire business world. On the second day after officially taking over the company, I cancelled all meetings and drove alone to the maximum security prison on the outskirts of London. In the special visitation room, separated by thick ballistic glass, I met my parents from this life. Prison life had long since worn them down beyond recognition. Arthur's hair has turned mostly white. His back is hunched, and his face is etched with lines of humiliation and regret. Victoria was even more terrifyingly aged, her once proud beauty completely gone, leaving only a pair of lifeless eyes. When they saw me, a glimmer of light simultaneously appeared in their cloudy eyes. "Charlotte, Charlotte, you've come to see us." Arthur was the first to speak, pressing his face excitedly against the glass. "Daddy knows he was wrong. Daddy is sorry to your mummy and to you, too. Can you please ask grandfather to let me out early?" Victoria also started crying, pounding on the glass with force. "Charlotte, Mummy misses you so much. Can you forgive Mummy?" Back then, Mummy was completely blinded by greed. They were still dreaming of a comeback. I watched them quietly. And only when they had cried enough and finished their performance did I slowly reveal a smile. "Arthur, Do you remember the first birthday gift you gave Eleanor was a vintage fountain pen? Arthur's crying suddenly stopped. He froze, looking at me in confusion. I turned back to Victoria, my smile unchanged. Victoria, do you remember that limited edition silk scarf Eleanor gave you? You said you loved it so much, but then you immediately used it as a cushion on the hotel headboard where you and Arthur were having an affair. Victoria's expression also froze. She looked at me, and a hint of terror began to appear in her eyes. I spoke softly through the glass. You two meticulously planned and killed Eleanor, taking everything she had. And then, with joyful hearts, you welcomed the fruit of your love. You raised her, watched her personally send you to hell, step by step. I stood up, looking down at the two bloodless faces on the other side of the glass. Slowly, I revealed the final mystery. What a shame. I am Eleanor. I saw Arthur's pupils dilate to their absolute limit. In an instant, his entire body went limp as if his bones had been pulled out, and he let out a hoarse, fish-like gurgle from his mouth. As for Victoria, she stared at me intently, the muscles on her face twitching uncontrollably. A few seconds later, she suddenly burst into a piercing, inhuman, maniacal laugh. She laughed. She cried, banging her head against the hard ballistic glass, as if driven to madness. I didn't look at them again. I turned around, pushed open the heavy iron door, and walked out. Behind me were the utterly broken and desperate screams of two sinners. Eleanor is already dead. The one who survived is Charlotte. The sky is vast, and the sea is wide. I can soar freely after hearing the two stories above. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you like this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.